once Trump arrives. But Shimon, I think it's just remarkable the fact that not only is this a historic indictment, but also the idea that the New York Police Department is going to have to arrange these security logistics with Secret Service themselves and dealing with something of that we've never seen before. As I should note, Trump's plane is now coming into LaGuardia, about to land here any moment.
I just want to point something out to you, Caitlin. I don't know what happened, but you can see all of these court officers here. They just ran into this park. I don't know if there was some kind of a fight here or something, but I think the point that I want to make here is just to show you how on edge some of the folks here are and keeping an eye on everything. You can see more police officers here moving in. This has sort of been a gathering spot here. It looks like they've just arrested someone here, Caitlin. We don't really know why, but this has sort of been the area where many of the protesters and supporters of Trump have been gathering. But this is the first time that we've seen anyone actually being arrested. We don't know why, but it was really interesting to watch because something was going on, and then all of a sudden, the court officers here jumped over these barricades and ran over here and just took that man into custody. But I think the reason why I'm showing you this is just to show you kind of some of the security measures that are in place here, the sensitivity, and certainly just how on alert the officers are here. You know, as I said, there are NYPD officers here and all of these court officers, and clearly they saw something, Caitlin, and they jumped over this way.
Okay, Shimon, keep an eye on that. Let us know what you hear about that. Clearly, there is a sense that city officials are bracing here. I just want to note for viewers, we are seeing former President Trump's plane land here at LaGuardia Airport in New York. That is his flight that he is taking before he is going to make his way over here to Trump Tower, Phil and Dana, before he is going to be arraigned tomorrow. That, of course, is a flight that they had been planning. The logistics of this had been certainly a big aspect. We know we had heard that initially when that indictment came down last Thursday, they wanted Trump to appear in a courtroom the following Friday, but they said they needed more time to work on the logistics of what exactly this was going to look like. So while there are still a lot of unknowns, there has been a lot of planning behind the scenes when it comes to Trump's legal team and Secret Service and the New York Police Department into this visit and coordinating this. And so Trump is going to get off that plane as the ex-president, but also as the first former or sitting president to ever have criminal charges facing him. And so he's not expected to speak while he's here in New York. They've said, of course, those are famous last words, Dana and Phil. We do know he will be speaking tomorrow night.
Wheels down, as we say. We see the Trump plane taxiing now, and we do expect him to get out shortly. We know from back in the campaign days that it had been wired with cable news. So it would not be a surprising thing that he is watching himself taxiing in New York on TV. It adds to the sort of surreal notion of this moment. But Donald Trump, born and raised in New York, of New York, now a resident of the state of Florida, back in New York to do something that he spent pretty much his entire adult life fighting, which is the legal system. As a private citizen, and then as a politician and as president in the way that a president does, but now back being a private citizen for the first time, getting to the point where he is a man who has been indicted, and he will see what the charges specifically are when he goes to the courtroom. And he is booked tomorrow morning, or tomorrow at some point.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical point. Neither the former president nor any of the advisors that traveled with him on that airplane that you're looking at right now, nor his legal team already on the ground in New York, have any idea what the actual indictment says. And I think that sense of the unknown, you and Caitlin and Shimon and everybody's done such incredible work on figuring out the choreography of this moment from the security perspective, from the Trump legal team perspective, Kristen Holmes as well down in Florida. The one thing they can't plan for is what they are going to discover tomorrow that is actually in black and white, that is in that indictment. And we saw the former president brought on a new, very high-powered lawyer today, very clearly kind of moving towards preparing for that unknown. But I think when you add that element in to the very historic nature, the very unprecedented nature of this moment, there is a lot of self-assuredness that they like to project publicly within the Trump orbit, the former president and his team. And that may absolutely be the case for what's going to transpire over the course of the coming weeks and months. But the reality is they don't know. And for a team and an operation that likes to be the ones kind of pulling the strings on everything, controlling the narrative, controlling how people see the pictures, what they see, how they see it, that has to be a somewhat unsettling moment, no matter how they feel or how they attempt to project themselves over the course of the next 24 hours.
Yeah, no question. And before they got on the plane, one of the former president's advisors, Jason Miller, texted me that the president views this as a challenge he has to take on for the American people. That is the spin. That is the messaging, I should say, very much that has been amplified by so many of Donald Trump's supporters and also even by some skeptics in the Republican Party of Donald Trump, because they feel like this is one of those rally around the team and, at this point, the front runner of the Republican team. We're not just talking about somebody who was president before, but is a candidate for president to try to get there again. And so what you just said, Phil, about the unknowns, what I just stated in terms of the messaging and the strategy, that's the known. That's all they can do is say, he's going to fight and we're doing this for the American people, whatever that means. But they know well and good that everything that is going to be presented to them in the courtroom tomorrow is going to be not politics, but a legal challenge that he's not had before. Caitlin, back to you.
Yeah, and one thing I think it's important to note is as Trump is returning, he is no longer a resident of New York City. Certainly, obviously, he was born and raised here. He now resides permanently and primarily in Florida. He was here last fall for a deposition. That was in another investigation that he was dealing with when it came to his business dealings. He's been back here a handful of times since then, but he is also returning for the first time since he has faced an indictment and faced criminal charges. That adds to the significance of this visit. He is on that plane with a handful of the campaign aides who are going to try to help him, as you were noting, Dana, there, with the way to take at least a political advantage of this. Of course, the ramifications of it are far from known. We won't know those for weeks or months, what those will actually look like. He's been talking to these aides. He's been on the phone with allies all weekend as he was playing rounds of golf and deciding how they could use this to his advantage. But it is still a very real legal issue. The legal and political issues, they sometimes conflate them, but they are certainly very different strategies here. I want to bring in our CNN senior legal analyst, Ellie Honig, and CNN's David Chalian, who are both here with me. David, obviously the significance of this moment is obvious. Everyone can see that Trump's plane is here. It is the first time since he has faced criminal charges. We've talked about the merits of the case, but just the idea in and of itself. His attorney was saying yesterday that what they wanted to do tomorrow was to make it as painless and classy as possible. Those are the words Joe Tacopina used in his interview with Dana.
You know who likes the word classy? Donald J. Trump. You see this native New Yorker, this boy from Queens now landing in New York City. And it's hard not to think, the images of this plane in the opening credits of The Apprentice, the fact that Trump loved having his name emblazoned on the side for all to see who landed at LaGuardia when he was a New York resident. But he doesn't just land now as the first ever former president or president to face an indictment. He also lands as the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024. And that's why you say it is both political and legal and, of course, historic. But he's going to try every moment that he's not in that courtroom, Caitlin, he's going to try to control the narrative that gets portrayed and really try to frame this entire case in his terms of a political battle that he's fighting. Once he's inside that courtroom tomorrow, of course, he doesn't get to control that.
Ellie, you can see there the staffers coming up plane. One thing I'll be watching also is Trump has a habit of speaking on the plane, as he's been doing. He's been going to some of these rallies. They do take reporters on the plane. We are told there is a reporter. There's a pool reporter on the plane with Trump. We'll see if he made any comments there, because that is where he's often been speaking the most in a back and forth with reporters beyond interviews with friendly media there. Those are the campaign aides who are working with Trump. Obviously, it's a smaller team than he's had previously but that's who, most of those are campaign staffers who came with him. Michael Cohen is at the center of all of this. That is Trump's former attorney, his former fixer. Cyrus Vance, who's the former Manhattan district attorney, now obviously that is Alvin Bragg's job, he was saying yesterday that Cohen's credibility is more than what you've heard his critics argue in recent days.
So this is all going to come down to corroboration. Prosecutors are very taken with corroboration because you never want to be in a position where you're asking a jury to just take the word of a convicted criminal at face value. It's not at all abnormal to base a case on the testimony of a person who's been convicted of crimes. We say to juries, that's the only way we can take you inside crime. So with Michael Cohen, it's all going to come down to, do the other witnesses back him up? Do the other documents back him up? Look, the cross-examination on Michael Cohen, I think, almost writes itself. He's a person who has been convicted of perjury, of financial fraud, of tax fraud. He hates Donald Trump with the heat of 1,000 suns. He makes no secret about that. And he has made prior inconsistent statements. In his past, he has said there was nothing criminal here. On the other hand, the argument from prosecutors will be, this is a person who has changed his life and turned himself around since Donald Trump, since he broke from Donald Trump. And bigger picture here, Caitlin, it's really a surreal moment. It's the kind of thing that you talk about and hypothesize about in law school. What would ever happen if we had a president or former president charged with crimes? And now we're about to see it play out for real. I think it will be a test of our system. It will be a solemn and somber moment. But I do have faith in our system. I think our judicial system, our judges, our prosecutors, our defense lawyers, and our rules and procedures will stand up. And what we'll see tomorrow is really a routine court appearance. Through it all, it's a routine court appearance. And
can you also, you know, the new Trump attorney that they just added, we don't know exactly when they added this new attorney, but it was reported today by Politico, then by CNN, that he has added a new attorney in his defense here in Manhattan. What does that say to you about how they're viewing this case internally?
This tells me Donald Trump is taking this case very seriously, as he should. Todd Blanche is the new attorney. He was a longtime federal prosecutor. We were colleagues together at the Southern District of New York. Todd was an exceptional prosecutor. He was in charge of the violent crime and gangs unit here in Manhattan. He then went up to White Plains, where he was in charge of the whole office there, which does every kind of crime. This is the kind of lawyer that you hire if you are taking it very, very seriously. I also should note, Caitlin, Todd Blanche and Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, are contemporaries at the Southern District of New York. We all three of us were there at the same time. I was a year or so ahead of those guys, but they started essentially within 6 months or a year of one another. So they know one another very, very well. That does not mean Alvin Bragg is going to do any favors for Todd Blanche. We have a way of running into one another, and we all play it straight. But it's going to mean he's somebody who has some sort of inherent credibility. So I think it's a move that you make if you're getting ready to fight and take this thing to trial.
David, so much of this, of what we are seeing right now, is highly choreographed by the Trump team. I've been talking to people in his orbit ever since he posted that Saturday that he was going to be arrested a few days later. And they have been talking about making sure that when he is in front of the cameras, he doesn't look defeated, that he is smiling, because they know, we may not have a camera in the courtroom tomorrow, but they know that every inch of this, what you will see from the moment he gets off this plane here, will be used, whether it's by his critics or by his campaign, as footage to rally people around him. And Jason Miller, one of his campaign aides, tweeted on the way here that they actually raised $7 million, they claim, since Thursday.
Yeah, in the first 3 days, in 72 hours since the indictment news, $7 million. And I mean, you've been looking at your email too, Caitlin. If you're on the list, you get a fundraising appeal almost every hour from the Trump campaign that points to this. It's also choreographed by Secret Service, Caitlin.
I think we lost your mic for a moment, David. We'll check back on that and pick up with that. Of course, what we were noting is just how choreographed this moment is, David. I think they fixed your mic. It's good to go now. But it does speak to the political aspect of this. We don't actually know that it will politically benefit Trump. We know it's certainly helping right now with fundraising. There are still major questions, though, of what it looks like.
There's no doubt. I mean, imagine, first of all, this may be just one indictment, and there are other investigations going on. If other indictments were to come, I just think it is impossible for us to know how this will play out, either in the nomination fight or if he is the nominee. I think we could pretty much say this kind of event is not going to bring voters to him that have already drifted away from him. But just waiting for him to come out here. You mentioned trying to get into Donald Trump's mindset and what's really going on in his head is something, is not a skill anyone has. But what must this nearly 77-year-old man be thinking as he returns to his home in a new context that no president has ever faced before?
Certainly a moment where he's going to be going into the Manhattan Criminal Courts building tomorrow for the first time to face an arraignment. Dan and Phil, obviously, the historical significance of this is notable. There are still big questions of what actually the implications of this are and what this looks like going forward. But as we wait for Trump to exit his plane, come here to Trump Tower where we are in New York, there are many questions facing even his own legal team.
So many questions, so many unanswered questions. But let's take a moment and talk about the moment that we are at. And Gloria Borger, let's start with you. Your thoughts as we watch what is the beginning of at least 24 hours of something that we haven't seen before. Ever.
Well, who you're going to see walk down these steps is probably one of the most famous people in the world. And he is a former president, a presidential candidate, and now he's a defendant. And we haven't seen that. It's hard to kind of process that. I think, as you were pointing out, Dana, before, that Donald Trump is somebody who's probably tried to avoid his day in court for a very long time. Decades. And now, you have this man who is saying to people who support him, I am your retribution. And he is going to make his grievance their grievance. And I think we're going to see that play out over and over again. And we'll see it play out in court with his attorneys.
It's a moment that he's, as you said, tried to avoid. It's also a moment that the country has tried to avoid for a very long time. Whenever it's gotten to the point where a president may encounter this kind of interaction with the legal system, the U.S. has kind of backed away from the brink. So it really is a remarkable moment in that respect. Collectively, I think, and politically, this country had said, we don't want to go there. And here we are, and it might have been unavoidable because of the sheer number of investigations against him at this point.
Yeah, and I want to bring in Sarah Murray, primarily because you covered his campaign from the beginning days back in 2015, and you're covering investigations now. Done an amazing amount of very good reporting on this individual, his lead up to his presidency, the investigations that have come since. What do you think when you see what we're watching right now beyond they have a lot of luggage?
They obviously have. They did not pack light for this journey. No, I think what you've seen is the shield of the presidency fall away from Donald Trump. When you talk about how long he's tried to avoid this, when he was in office as the president, he was able to say, I'm the president of the United States. All of these silly investigations, you can't bring charges against me. You can't be dragging me into court. Essentially, I have better things to do. And he no longer has that defense available to him. And I think, one of the things I wonder watching this is how many more times we could see something like this play out when it comes to Donald Trump. We don't know, and his legal team doesn't know if this could be the first of potentially multiple indictments. That's one of the things they worry about. And when you talk to them, they ask you just as much as you say, what are you hearing? They say, what are you hearing? What are you hearing about Georgia? What are you hearing about the Mar-a-Lago documents probe? What are you hearing about the January 6th investigation? Because they know that those are real legal threats.
Yeah. And as we talk about the legal threats, Elliot, I want you to talk about, there he is. Let's just take a moment and watch. So there he is, Donald Trump, the first former president ever to have to come anywhere to face a day in court. I think what was notable right there, and we're going to probably see him several more times before he gives his speech tomorrow night, but we were actually talking before whether we would see the fist bump, whether we would see the thumbs up, and we didn't see any of that. And Sarah, forgive me, Sarah, I just want to go to you on that because you've spent many, many hours, thousands of hours, covering him since 2015. What does that tell you, that body language?
I mean, I think it was much more resigned than what we expect to see. Again, he has a lot of opportunities to appear defiant later today, tomorrow, when he makes, remarks tomorrow evening at Mar-a-Lago. But, it is sort of a pretty resigned march down the stairs into his car. No Trump hat. We're used to seeing sort of his campaign swag as well as the swagger, and that's not what we're seeing right now.
And I started to say about the fact that as we were preparing for this moment, just as many other people have been doing, maybe most people aren't as nerdy as I am, but going back and looking at not just the Constitution, but the way people have interpreted the Constitution when it comes to legal jeopardy for a president. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when a person is in the White House, is president, the Justice Department interprets this, and most people interpret this as somebody who is immune from typical criminal prosecution. But that the founders explicitly wanted a former president to be treated like a regular citizen.
And moreover, the founders in crafting the Constitution put very few rules or restrictions on who can be president. You just got to be 35 years old, and you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States.
Doesn't have to be a he.
Pardon me. Thank you for correcting me on that. He or she needs to be 35 years old and a natural-born citizen of the United States. There's nothing in the Constitution about someone who's been charged with a crime or someone who has been convicted of a crime being barred from serving or running for president of the United States. Now, if you remember former President Trump, and viewers should remember that former President Trump was impeached twice, and the United States Senate could have, in that process, barred him from running for future office. Now, they voted against that and did not do so. That would have been the way to prevent someone from running for office or from running for the presidency again. But you're right, there's very few limitations or restrictions on who gets to be president. And he's a candidate now. He'll be a candidate tomorrow after he's indicted, and will be a candidate presumably throughout the rest of the.
And to underscore your point, it was always a courtesy, the post-term prosecutorial immunity. Right. It's not baked anywhere that says you're free from any kind of scrutiny. And I think it's really saying something that this former president reached this point where that courtesy, in a sense, has been rescinded by the legal community.
There's one other thing that struck me just watching him go down the steps, is thinking back to the escalator he went down with Melania. And the family was not there. Melania was not there. He looked like such a solitary, somber figure there, which we're not used to.
Right. In a way, that's what the press conference is for, right?
That's
they're
right.
Planning to have
but
tomorrow.
I think he understood that moment very well because it needed to be somber.
I've been in court a bunch over the years, and it's just so serious and solemn. And the public, on account of some of these questions about cameras in the courtrooms and so on, most of the public don't really have a sense as to what happens in a courtroom or how courts play, or when someone is led into a court and has to look the judge in the eye and say, sir or ma'am, I believe I am not guilty of this offense, and in a year you're going to bring me to trial in front of 12 randomly picked citizens of this jurisdiction, and in judgment of them, it is a serious, somber, solemn moment. You feel it in your bones. It's very serious, and we saw, and perhaps saw some of that there today.
Yeah, there's no question about that. We have a lot more to watch, a lot more to weigh in on. Right now, you are looking at former President Trump and his motorcade on their way to Trump Tower. The former president obviously is in New York, landed at LaGuardia Airport in order to face the new reality for a former president that has been indicted and will have to face criminal charges. We have a lot more as we continue to watch this play out. Stay with us.